Hello to the kiddos of class 4. Let us start with your first lesson, which is the bridal shoe. Do you all know what is bridal or what is bride? Bride is a woman who has just married or who is about to get married. So this story is a very funny story. It is about Tenali Raman and his wisdom. I'm sure you may have heard this name of Tenali Raman. I'm sure you may have seen him in cartoon shows or you may have read his storybooks. He is very famous for his intelligence and also the humor he presents. Now, before I start with this story, let me give you a brief introduction about Tenali Raman. Tenali Raman was a great Indian poet. He was also a great thinker, very intelligent person. And he was one of the 8 courtiers in the court of the king Krishna Deva Raya. What do you mean by courtiers? The ministers present in the king's court. The place where the king sits is known as court. The king sits along with his courtiers, along with his ministers who advise him in, who suggest him in taking decisions. So this king, Krishna Deva Raya, was a king of Vijayanagara Empire. He was a king of South India, and in his court there were 8 ministers, 8 courtiers. One of them was Tenali Raman. This man was not only very clever, he was also a jester in the court. Jester means a comedian. He used to trick people's minds and create some sort of entertainment to the king. That is how he was very popular. Alright, now that you have got a brief introduction about who Tenali Raman was, now let us get started with our story. This story is not true, it is a fictional story and it is written by Devika Rangachari. Written by who? Devika Rangachari. The characters, when I say characters, I'm talking about the king Krishna Deva Raya and his intelligent courtier Tenali Raman. These 2 are the real characters. The king Krishna Deva Raya ruled South India for about 20 years. His kingdom was then, in the past, it was called as the Empire of Vijayanagara. What was it called? The Vijayanagara Empire. So he ruled the South India for about how many years? 20 years. And earlier the name was Vijayanagara Empire, which referred to entire southern part of India. But now it has changed. Vijayanagara is now known as Hampi. Hampi is a small place in the state of Karnataka. I hope you got a brief idea of who the King Krishna Deva Raya and Tenali Raman were. Now let's get started with the story. Okay. Let me read it out and explain you. Tenali Raman was the jester at the court of King Krishnadevaraya. Tenali Raman often showed the king true wisdom through simple pranks and humor, as in the story by Devika Rangachari. See, not only Tenali Raman was a great poet and thinker, he was also a jester. Jester means comedian. His job was to not only advise the king in taking important decisions, he used to also play certain pranks. Pranks means small entertaining acts in order to create some sort of entertainment or comedy or humor. He used to do such funny things and make people in the court laugh. And the story is written by who? Devika Rangachari. Alright. Now this story begins with a discussion which is going on between King Krishnadevaraya and Tenali Raman. What is the discussion? The discussion is that Tenali Raman says to the king Krishnadevaraya that it is very easy to fool people. He says it is not a difficult task to make people believe, to trick people's mind and believe whatever he wants them to believe. He also says that he can actually make people do whatever he wants them to by playing certain tricks with their mind, by fooling them or making them believe him. Now, king listens to this and he says, I don't think it is that easy to fool people. Then what does Tenali Raman say? He says, well, I can do that. In fact, I can also make any person throw a shoe at you by making him believe that it is not wrong. What did Tenali say? He said to the king that he can fool people and make them do whatever he wants them to. He also says that he will make any person to throw a shoe at a king. And he plays with the person's mind in such a way that the person will not feel wrong while he throws shoe at king. So he's trying to say it is very easy to fool people. Who is saying this? Tenali Raman. Now the king is surprised. The king laughs. Are you sure you're going to make a person throw a shoe at me? You seem very confident. Prove it to me. What does the king say? Prove it. Let me see how you do that. You seem quite confident. Let me see. Let's read the story. Once King Krishnadevaraya and his clever courtier Tenali Raman were discussing about how easily people could be fooled. The king remarked, I don't believe that anyone can be completely credulous. Credulous means ready to believe things. Credulous refers to a kind of person who readily believes whatever you tell him. He accepts and believes that to be true. That person is called credulous person. Okay. I don't agree, replied Raman. I can make anyone believe or do what I want them to. I can even make a person throw a shoe at you in the belief that he is doing the right thing. See, I told you this a while ago. He said he's going to convince a person to throw a shoe at King Krishnadevaraya and make the person believe that whatever he's doing is right. Now, really? The king laughed. I challenge you to do that. I accept the challenge, said Raman, but I need some time. So, now the king is curious about how Tenali Raman is going to prove his wisdom. So the king challenges Raman to prove it. Tenali Raman accepts the challenge and he asks for some time. He asks the king to give him some time to prove his intelligence. Now, a month later, the king was to marry Sharadambal, the beautiful daughter of a chieftain in Coorg. Now, a month after this discussion about, fooling people, the king, Krishnadevaraya, is about to get married. Married to who? He was about to get married to a chieftain's daughter. What is the meaning of chieftain? A head of a specific place. A chief, a head person. So, a head. So, this person was a chieftain, the father of the bride, Sharadambal. Okay, who is the bride here in the story? Sharadambal is the bride. So, the story, the title of the story is A Bridal Shoe. Here, her shoe, a bridal shoe. Who is the bride? Sharadambal. And who is she? Daughter of a chieftain. Who is a chieftain here? What is the meaning of chieftain? A head of a particular place. He was a head of which place? Coorg. Coorg is a district in the state of Karnataka. The chieftain was very nervous because he had no idea of the ceremonies to be performed. Now, the king was about to get married to this chieftain's daughter, Sharadambal, chieftain of Coorg district. Now, this chieftain is very nervous. Why is he nervous? Because he's about to get his daughter married off, and he has no idea about the procedures involved in the marriage. What are the things he's supposed to do and everything. So he's nervous. Ceremonies. Ceremony means a celebration. Marriage is a ceremony. It's a kind of celebration. So he was nervous. Who was nervous? The chieftain was nervous. The bride's father was very nervous. Why? Because he had no idea about the procedures or the things to be performed in the marriage. So what happens now? One day, Raman secretly visited Coorg and told the chieftain, I'll tell you what is expected of you, but you must promise not to tell anyone that I coached you. Now what does this Raman do? Now he is about to prove his intelligence in front of the king. So he took some time from the king, right? Now he's in the same process. Let's see what he's going to do. He secretly visits who? Tenali Raman secretly visits to the Coorg district. He meets with the chieftain, the bride's father. And what does Tenali Raman say? I know. I will guide you in understanding the procedures of the marriage. The chieftain is nervous. He's very worried about the ceremonies, right? So Tenali Raman said, do not worry, I am here. I will help you in understanding what are the things to be done in a marriage ceremony. He asked the chieftain to keep this as a secret, not to tell others that Tenali Raman visited Coorg district and helped chieftain. He asks chieftain to keep this as a secret. The chieftain swore secrecy and listened carefully to Raman's instructions. So the chieftain swore. Swore here is a V2 form, the past form of the verb swear. Swear means to promise. So he swore. The chieftain promised Tenali Raman that he is not going to tell anyone about Tenali Raman's visit. Okay, now let's see what happens. This is a very important rite that needs to be performed, said Raman. The bride should wear a velvet shoe and throw it at her husband after the wedding ceremony. So what does Tenali Raman say to the chieftain? He is saying that it is a very important rite. Rite, R-I-T-E, rite means, what is a rite? A fixed way of doing something. It is a fixed practice, a certain way of carrying out something. Rite means a fixed procedure or process of carrying out something. Carrying out something. Here, what is the rite? What is the procedure in the marriage that Tenali Raman is telling to the chieftain? He says that it is a procedure in our kingdom that the bride, the woman who is about to get married here is referring to Sharadambal, the daughter of chieftain. She has to wear a velvet shoe. And what she has to do? She has to take off one of her velvet shoe and throw it at her husband after their wedding. He makes this statement by telling chieftain that it is a rite. It is a fixed way. This is how we do things in our side. It is a part of procedure. This is how he tricks the mind. He is trying to trick the mind of the chieftain here. The chieftain looked uncertain. Uncertain means unsure. Certain means to be sure about something. Uncertain, to not be sure about something. So when chieftain heard it, he was not sure. What is this man telling? Throwing a shoe at a king? Is it even acceptable? He is very not sure about the things. But how can a wife throw shoes at her husband? It is an improper act. What is the chieftain saying? How can she throw a shoe at the king? It is improper act. It is considered highly disrespectful. It's not a good thing to do that. Not in this family, said Raman. Now what did Tenali Raman say? No, it is not considered wrong in this family because it is part of this procedure in our family. This is how the king likes. This is how we do. It's very common to do this. Okay, king won't be offended. He won't feel bad. This is usual and it's common at our place, in our family. The chieftain agreed. Give me the shoes and I will see that the custom is observed. So again, the custom, rites and ritual, all of these have similar meanings. So don't think too much about what is the custom. It is again a fixed way of doing something. A religious, a traditional practice. So here the chieftain agreed. He agrees. He believes what Tenali Raman told him. He is no longer feeling that this act of throwing shoe is incorrect, is highly disrespectful. He is not thinking of that. He believed, he is convinced that it is a right thing to throw a shoe at the king. So now the chieftain accepts the Tenali Raman suggestion. And what does he say? He asks Tenali Raman to give him shoes, velvet shoes, and he sees that that procedure is done. Let's see what happens. The wedding was celebrated with great ceremony as the bride and groom were about to depart for Vijayanagara. Now, the wedding took place in the Coorg district. The king came to the chieftain's place, Coorg district. So, the wedding took place at a very grand level, because it's a king's wedding, it has to be very grand and lavish. So, the wedding ceremony was done, and the bride and the groom, bride, a married woman, and a married man. So both the king and his queen, both were ready to depart. Depart means to leave Coorg and to visit, to go back to Vijayanagara. Depart means to leave. So now they were ready to go back to Vijayanagara. They are in Coorg, they got married. After the wedding ceremony, they are heading back to Coorg, Vijayanagara. Sharadammal took off one of her velvet shoes and threw it at Krishnadevaraya. The king ducked sharply, rubbing his cheek where the shoe had grazed it. So what happened now? After the wedding was over and the king and queen were about to leave for Vijayanagara, what did the bride do? What did the queen do? She took off one of her velvet shoe and she threw at her husband. She threw at king. And when she did that, she did not think it's a wrong thing to do, because her mind was tricked in such a way by Tenali Raman that he and her father had no idea that they were doing a very disgraceful act. So now as she threw the shoe at the king, what did the king do? He ducked. Ducked means to escape from being shot. When you're being shot, what do? You escape, you try to bend or move from that place. What is that? Ducking. To defend. To defend yourself from being shot, that is ducking, or to bend. And despite the fact he ducked, he bent, the shoe went rubbing his cheek, the shoe grazed his cheek. The shoe touched his cheek and fell back. Grazed means to touch lightly. Okay, the shoe rubbed his cheek, it grazed his cheek and it was slightly painful. So the king started rubbing his cheek and stared at his bride amazed. And he stared at his bride in a shock. What did she do? She threw a shoe at me. She looked at her in a great amazement, in a great shock. Raman whispered to the king, "It is not her fault. I told her to do it. You must forgive her." Now Raman whispers to the king. Whisper means to talk in a very low tone, like when you tell a secret to your friend in her ears. Do not do this. This is known as whisper, a very low tone. What does Tenali say? Don't be angry, your majesty. I told her to throw a shoe at you. You remember the challenge? I told you that I would make a person throw a shoe at you and all. So he reminds Krishnadevaraya of that challenge, and he says it is not her fault. I told her, I tricked her mind. And you have to not be angry at her. You have to forgive her. Let's see. Once back at Vijayanagara, the king got the whole story out of Raman and said grimly, "Yes, you have won the challenge, but I'm furious with the shocking way you have proved it. Don't show your face at the court tomorrow, or else I'll have you whipped." So what does the king say? They reach back to Vijayanagara now. Who? The queen and the king. They go back to their kingdom, Vijayanagara, and after going there, Tenali Raman once again reminds king of their challenge. "See, this is why I did this." He reminds him of the flashback that happened, the discussion that took place between king and Tenali Raman. Now the king accepts, "Okay, you have won this challenge. You proved me wrong. You fooled them and you made them throw a shoe at me. But I am very furious." Furious means what? Extreme anger. I am very upset and extremely angry with you because I did not like the way you proved yourself. It was highly embarrassing, because throwing a shoe at a king is something which is highly embarrassing and shameful. So the king is very angry and upset. And what does the king order? He orders Tenali Raman not to show his face. He says, "Tenali, do not show your face, or else I'll have you whipped." Whipped means to be beaten up. He says that if you show your face tomorrow in the court, you will be beaten up. That is the punishment. Whip is an object. It is a thin, long object. It is made of leather and it is used in beating up. It was used by kings in olden days. So they used to use a whip to hit the people who did something wrong. So whipped means to be beaten. So whip is an object. It is a long leather sheet, like a substance through which people were bet in the past, in the olden days. So what happened the following morning? Tenali Raman appeared in the court of the king Krishnadevaraya. Now remember, the king ordered him not to show his face, or else he would be beaten up. Yes or no? So Tenali Raman again appeared the next morning. But how did he come? With a pot over his face. He covered his face and he came to the court. Now everybody were discussing. That's the reason why there was an uproar. That is the reason why there was a noise in the hall, in the court. "I warned you, didn't I?" began the angry king. "Now I'll have you whipped." "What?" said Raman in a muffled tone. "I have obeyed your orders exactly, sir. You told me not to show my face at court. All of it is hidden by the spot, isn't it?" So what is Tenali Raman saying? Now first, when he entered the court, the king got very angry. "Why is this person here? I ordered him not to show his face." So the king says, "I warned you, didn't I? Why are you back to my court? Why did you come back?" Then, "I will have you whipped now. I will make sure you're beaten up. You'll get your punishment now." So what does Tenali says? Why, your majesty? What's wrong? I obeyed your orders. You asked me not to show my face. That is the reason why I've covered it with the pot. My whole face is covered with this pot, isn't it? See, I'm not showing my face. He said this in a muffled tone. Muffled means it is a very lowered voice, as if when you cover something over your mouth and speak, the noise, that voice is called a muffled voice or tone. I'm going to cover my hand over my mouth and speak. Hello guys. This is a muffled voice. Okay. Why was Tenali's voice muffled? Because his face was covered with a pot. The king stared at him in annoyance. Annoyance means anger, lot of irritation. Okay, irritation. So the king stared at Tenali Raman with lot of irritation, lot of anger and mixed feelings, and then his shoulders shook. The king's shoulders shook. That is because nothing could be heard except the king's laughter. Now, after Tenali Raman said that this is how he covered his face with the pot, the king stared at him for a while and the king started laughing. Why did he do so? Because he found it very funny. Oh Raman, the king said at last, it is just no use getting angry with you. No use at all, sir, Raman grinned. So the king laughs out aloud. Nothing else could be heard in the court except the king's laughter. The king started laughing at the wisdom of Tenali Raman, how intelligent man he was. The king ordered him not to show his face, but the king did not order not to come, right? Not to step into the court. He did not say anything like that. What did the king order him? To not to show his face. That is why he covered his face with a pot. And he came back again. So that's what was very funny, and everybody started laughing, including the king. And what does the king say at the last? He says, there's just no use getting angry with you, Raman, because you're such a funny man. There's no point in getting angry with you. Then Raman replies, no use, sir, no use of getting angry with me. He replies and he grins. What is a grin? A wide smile. A wide smile which is usually from ear to ear. A very wide smile. Okay? So Tenali Raman grinned, and that is how the story comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a funny story, wasn't it? Okay. So now that you have heard the story, I want you all to read the story once. After watching this video, you can text ma'am to send the PDF of this lesson. She will send you. Please read it. I'm sure you're going to laugh it once again. So that was all for today's class. Thank you. Take care and be safe. Don't step out. Bye-bye.